North Korea is definitely one of the weirdest countries in the world. Not much is known about it, and that's not by accident. North Korea's government polices pretty much everything that goes on in the country, from access to the internet to people's abilities to even move freely. It's truly insane. With such levels of surveillance and control, it's pretty easy for the government to have a say on the types of material and content about the country that gets out to the public on a regular basis. Still, though, it hasn't stopped some determined people from sharing pictures that show just how daily life can be in this hermit kingdom. In this video, we'll shed some light on some of the most remarkable pictures that have made it to the internet, showing exactly how, well, unique that North Korea really is. Here are 25 photos secretly smuggled out of North Korea. Number 25. A man eating grass. The first photo I'd like to show you is of a man that's literally picking grass from the ground in a public space. Now, you may be thinking that he's just trying to do some composting or give gardening a go, but that's not necessarily true. You see, despite what the government might tell you, North Korea is actually a really poor country, and it's not uncommon to see their citizens foraging for food to eat. There have been several reports of people starving to death in North Korea, while some of their citizens basically have to survive on crumbs. All of this takes place while members of the country's elite live like kings and just ball out. So if you've thought inequality in the United States was crazy, well, North Korea can take things to a whole different level. Number 24. The Border Gunship. You may be wondering, if North Korea is such a terrible place to live, why have its citizens not just left? Well, here's the thing. Besides the fact that people are poor and travel is regulated, North Korea's government essentially has measures in place to kill anyone who tries to escape the country. In this picture, you see a soldier standing by a gunship close to the border that sits between North Korea and China. And her job is essentially to look out for anyone who tries to cross the border into China and then shoot them. North Korea's government literally tries to keep people from leaving the country by threatening their lives, and since it's a state where the government has all the power, they literally face zero consequences. Number 23. Barbed wire fences. Yet another show of just how desperate the government is to keep people stuck in the country. Here's a picture of how insanely protected the border between North Korea and China is. This is a picture of a barbed wire fence covering miles of North Korea's coastline. The fencing is essentially meant to keep people in and to ensure that anyone who tries to swim in or out will be caught without stress. It is electric, so anyone who even touches it immediately gets zapped. If a person does manage to break through the barrier, they'll then be met with one of the guards patrolling, and you pretty much have zero chance. Of course, that's not to say that people haven't tried to escape this country. In fact, some have even succeeded, but it came at a huge risk to their lives because if they'd been caught, it would have pretty much meant game over. Number 22. Slave labor camp. Now, it's no secret that dictatorships, such as the one in North Korea, like to make use of forced slave labor, especially with their own citizens, to carry out several specific tasks. And as one would expect, North Korea takes things to a different level. This picture, which was taken a few years ago, shows two women who were at one of the government's many slave labor camps. These women would essentially have to work from sunup to sundown, harvesting plants and carrying out other menial tasks that the government deems necessary. There have been reports of thousands of deaths at work camps like these, although not much is known about the extent of possible human rights abuses that could be going on there. At the moment, North Korea is not the only country that's known to have a work camp. Nations like China and Russia have also been accused of this act, essentially using their own citizens for slave labor. What a cruel world indeed. Number 21. Terrible transport. If there's one thing that you have probably learned already, it's that life in North Korea can be pretty rough. But how rough, you may ask? Well, take this image for example. It shows the types of queues that North Koreans have to endure just to get on a bus. Now, I know that public transportation is never easy anywhere. Even in New York, taking the subway can be a total pain in the behind. But when you consider having to endure this sort of hassle every day, as well as the fact that you'd most likely be squeezed inside the bus like a bloody piece of canned tuna, I think I'd take the subway experience without blinking. Issues like these are simple because resources in a country like North Korea are already stretched thin. So providing basics like decent transportation is seemingly impossible there. Number 20. Child labor. As already covered, North Korea's government essentially uses its own citizens like slaves. But to give you an extent of how bad things can be, it appears that forced labor in the country doesn't even respect your age. Several images have made the rounds on the internet, which shows the government of North Korea using its own children as laborers. These children have to till the land and work from sunrise to sunset with little to no pay whatsoever. These are children that should literally be in school or out playing with their friends, but instead they're being used under the scorching sun, farming and tilling the land just so they can have something to eat. And if you look closely at the top, you can see a soldier standing there keeping a lookout. These soldiers are there to ensure that everyone does their fair share of the work. And it doesn't really matter if they get abusive or coercive towards these children, as long as the work is complete. Number 19. The Secret Female Army. Despite being a relatively poor country, one interesting thing about North Korea is that it has quite the strong military. In fact, the North Korean army is one of the most populated in the world, with well over 7 million members. And as you would expect, this massive army isn't because a lot of North Koreans suddenly were bitten by the patriotic bug and then decided to enlist. Oh no, it's because many of them were mandated to join the military by its government. While men make most of the North Korea's military system, the country actually also has quite the female workforce. While these women are designated military members, they actually do not do any combat. Instead, they participate mainly in ceremonies, wielding their massive katanas as they march in line. Just as well, there are weekly shows where the women have displays for the supreme leader and his inner circus. Number 18. Unsafe construction. Part of the many issues in North Korea has been the fact that the country isn't necessarily technologically advanced. It doesn't have much in terms of a manufacturing sector, and with the government pretty much restricting the importation of many items, it's impossible to even get construction materials flown in. So what do you do when you need to build a house and other buildings, but you cannot get the materials that you need? Well, you simply have to make do with what you've got. Now, you may think that this photo was taken in a remote part of North Korea, but it wasn't. In fact, this is Pyongyang, North Korea's capital city. Constructors are literally working with ropes and playing fast and loose with their own lives just because they have no other choice. Hundreds of construction workers are said to be dying in North Korea on an annual basis, and with nothing in terms of safety procedures or products, it's no wonder that most of the homes that are built in the country are basic with very minimal amenities. Number 17. The Picture of Kim Il-sung. Kim Il-sung was one of the most revered leaders of North Korea and was the grandfather to the current supreme leader, Kim Jong-un. The status of Kim Il-sung remains so solid that it's currently illegal to take pictures of his massive bronze statues from the backside. The statue, which is located in Pyongyang, shows the former supreme leader in military gear and standing tall and proud. It's one of the most popular monuments in North Korea, along with works of art such as the Mansu Hill Grand Monument. So why aren't you allowed to take a picture of his statue from the back? Well, absolutely nobody knows. Number 16. Homeless people on the streets. This was pretty much expected. For a country that's so poor, it's no wonder that they have several of their citizens literally living on the streets. This picture shows a man and a little child, who we can only assume is his son or some other younger relative, literally sleeping on a bench because they have nowhere else to go. Homelessness is another thing that North Korea has in common with many other countries, and to be honest, it's understandable. Even the most developed of countries have a homeless problem, But when you consider to the extent of which the country's government tries to censor any imagery of homeless people, it just gets a whole lot more weird. Why go through all the trouble to hide something that everyone knows is there? Number 15. The Kim Jong-il Festival. Now, you know how we all love to celebrate different events and festivals? Well, while these festivals tend to draw thousands of people, they're all voluntary. No one forces you to come out for a parade on Christmas Day or St. Patrick's Day, but over in North Korea, that's not actually the case. This is an image from a recent edition of the Kim Jong-il Festival, a festival that's set aside annually to celebrate the life of the former Supreme Leader Kim Jong-il. You can see people literally being marched to go and pay homage to a monument that honors the former Supreme Leader. It's all part of the government's efforts to keep their former leaders as deities in order to create fear in the hearts of people. And to be honest, it all just looks kind of weird. Number 14. Cistern in a bathroom. When it comes to countries like North Korea, hard times pretty much fall on anyone, and even though you may have amenities that others might not have access to, none of it means that you won't have to deal with some hardships as well. Take housing, for example. You might think that owning a house would be the pinnacle of comfort, but that's not always the case. This picture shows the bathroom of what's considered to be a modern home in North Korea, and you can see a cistern being used to store water. It basically means that the plumbing system in the home is so terrible that people need to resort to things like cisterns. And it just goes to show that the country treats its citizens so badly that they can't even have running water. Number 13. The shopping mall for the elite. As I said earlier, one epitome of life in North Korea is massive inequality. Sure, things are bad for most people, but like in many countries, there's also the tiny few who get to enjoy the best that life has to offer. Take this picture, for example. A woman is obviously seen in a shopping mall holding a small cart that's full of food products. If you notice anything here, it would be how almost empty the entire shopping mall is. That's because places like these are literally closed off to members of the public. You have to be connected to the ruling class or be a member of the elite to enjoy access to such amenities as these. And so, if you're just a common person looking for food or basic needs for life, well, good luck to you, my friend. Number 12. The empty dolphinarium. North Korea tries its best to show some semblance of modernization, even though we all know that's not true. Part of that is the country's use of things like dolphinariums, where people can come in to see dolphins in their natural habitat. In this image, a tourist took a picture of the dolphinarium, except that it was filled significantly with soldiers. It's crazy because state propaganda would try to spin it by saying that the dolphinarium was full, but how do you expect that to be the case when most of the people are too poor to even attend a show? What are the soldiers even doing there? Don't they have work to do? Did someone just mandate that they should all be there to impress someone else? Something smells fishy, and I don't think it's the dolphins. Number 11. Propaganda computers. When you're a tourist in North Korea, there are a lot of restrictions put in place on the types of images that you can take. In this instance, a tourist was taken to a local home that had pretty much been staged for them. The home included several impressive appliances, which included, especially, computers. But even though there were two girls sitting at the computers, they actually couldn't do any work because there was no power. The girls pretty much stood there and acted like they were pushing buttons when everyone knew that it was a giant fib. Maybe if they had spent as much time developing their country as they spent creating this farce, the country would be in a much better place right now. Number 10. Kim Il-sung's broom. Remember the Mansu Hill Grand Monument I talked about earlier? That monument essentially honors Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il, the two recent supreme leaders of North Korea. I'm pretty sure that a statue of Kim Jong-un will be added when he passes on as well. But here's another interesting rule. These monuments are supposed to be kept clean at all times, regardless of the situation, and leaving any form of items or particles around them is considered to be a major crime. But sadly, it looks as though someone who was contracted to clean the place didn't quite get that memo. The image shows that a cleaning worker had essentially left their utensils at the site of the monument, which is a big no-no according to North Korea's government. No one knows who committed this atrocity, but just think of the different possible punishments that could be meted out to them. Public flogging, perhaps? Execution? No one can really say. Number 9. Poor kids working. We've established that North Korea's government is heavy on propaganda and making their country look much better than it is. And in that case, you can only imagine how upset they might be if this image made the rounds. The image shows a pair of girls who probably are not any more than 5 or 6 years old, literally having to fetch water from a nearby source. Unlike wealthy countries where things like access to drinkable water is pretty much easy to come by, North Koreans have to suffer significantly even to just get the most basic of amenities. So being able to get something as simple as water becomes an absolute chore. Don't tell that to the government, though. Number 8. The subway channel. Even though infrastructure is still pretty basic in North Korea, the country has made some progress. For instance, it's managed to build an underground rail system, kind of like the subway in New York. But the issue, however, is that the subway here also doubles as a bomb shelter. Essentially, the government is making it so that when the threat of nuclear war occurs, people will have to run and hide underneath the cover of the subway system. But it also forces the question, just how paranoid are these people that they have to resort to such things like these? Number 7. A soldier's life. It may be easy to think that civilians in North Korea are the only ones who suffer most of the hardships, but once again, you would be quite wrong. While military men and women are usually the ones who oversee common people doing menial labor, it doesn't necessarily mean that they are immune to it as well. In fact, it's commonplace to find military personnel taking out the trash or handling some form of hard labor or another. Taking a look at this poor guy hauling logs like a professional lumberjack. And for some of these military personnel, the hard labor can be due to punishments of some kind. For a lot of them, though, it's not a punishment. It's simply the government taking advantage of the fact that they're available and putting them to work. Imagine signing up for the military thinking you'll be defending your country, only for you to be handling nonsense like hauling logs. That's the true definition of a bait and switch. Number 6. Sleeping on duty. The last story actually acts as a great introduction for the next image. No one really knows why this military officer chose to nod off in an open field, but I can only imagine him being well tired after a hard day of manual labor. Now, it's also interesting that the guy chose to just nod off in the middle of a workday. Wasn't he even scared that he could be caught? I'm pretty sure the punishment for him being caught napping while on duty would have been quite severe, and for his sake, I sure hope his supervisors didn't see this picture. Number 5. Pose for Kim. Another interesting law in North Korea is that you should always pay the utmost respect to the Kim family, even if they're not there. For instance, it's been seen almost as a crime for you to take a picture in front of the portraits of the Kim family members while doing something silly like throwing up a peace sign. Now, I'm not sure what got into these children and made them throw up signs in front of the Kim family portraits, and for their sake, I sure hope that they're okay, because who knows what old Kim would do if he sees these images and then decides to throw a fit. Number 4. North Korea's gray markets. Remember when I told you that a lot of malls and shopping areas in North Korea are pretty much inaccessible to the country's most poor population? Well, a lot of people have tried to work around that problem, and that's led to the rise of gray markets. Essentially, black markets are illegal in North Korea. The government regulates the importation of goods heavily in the country, and anyone who's caught trying to sidestep this restriction will be dealt with seriously. Nevertheless, people have still found ways to gain access to some of the essentials that they need on a daily basis. And this is a perfect example of a North Korean gray market. You can see this family opening a very small stall where they sell their wares, from packs of gum to cigarettes and toilet paper. The stall is small and makeshift, so the people can pretty much pack up at a moment's notice and make a run for the hills if they hear there's a crackdown on the way. It is a really terrible way to live if you think about it, because any small inconvenience and your means of livelihood will be taken away from you in a flash. Number 3. Starving children. Nothing says a country has failed like children literally starving and foraging for food in the streets. But I guess the government of North Korea gives zero cares about these little ones. The image here shows two siblings who are literally eating corn that's not even been cooked or boiled. My guess is that they probably had to be in charge of harvesting that corn or doing some form of menial work, and the corn was probably given to them as payment for the work they did for that day. These children were so hungry, they didn't even wait until they got home before tearing into it, which, by the way, was not even processed yet. It's truly a tale of ravenous hunger, and if these are the children that we've seen, imagine how many more children are living under these conditions in the country. Number 2. Power outages. For a country with such poor infrastructure, is it any wonder that things like power outages are so common? No, but that hasn't stopped the North Korean propaganda machine from trying to make it seem as though the country always has power. A few years ago, a tourist in the country was at one of its museums when the power went out, and documenting the situation, they came up with this gem. The photographer was eventually ordered to delete the picture, and his handlers even told him that power outages in the country were due to the American embargo. And sure, it wouldn't be out of the question for North Korea to blame Uncle Sam for power failures in their own country. Fortunately for the tourist, he was able to save the picture and show us just how life can be in this country. Number 1. Unfamiliar cars. One thing that many people in developed countries tend to take for granted is the many technological advancements that you see around you. But trust me, if you were born in North Korea, a lot of these things would be foreign to you. Take this picture, for example. The picture was taken in Pyongyang, and it depicts children who are literally playing on the roads even as cars pass by. Essentially, while the vehicles have become more popular in North Korea over the years, there are still several people who are not exactly used to them. So you'll see children literally playing in the streets as cars pass by them, just like they have no cares in the world. The only question on my mind is this: where are their parents? Have they been imprisoned? Or perhaps they're just out doing menial labor in order to get some food. You know, like every other common person. Life in North Korea can be difficult for sure, and when you see how people live over there, it tends to make you want to appreciate the life that you have even more. But what do you think? Is this a country you'd like to hit for a quick vacation? Let me know all about it in the comments section down below.